What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for Thursday night football's showdown slate between the Packers and the Titans. While you're coming in, I appreciate it if you could hit that thumbs up on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the largest field GPP on DraftKings. Some of the steps I'll be taking here I wouldn't do if I were playing a small field contest or a cash game. Wouldn't necessarily have to leave salary on the table, for example, or use off the wall kinds of plays. So some of the steps I'll be taking here only for large field GPPs, but that is what I will be setting up for. Going to try and keep this relatively short. I have also published an article on the reasoning behind a lot of the steps I'll take here, explaining why I'm trying to make unique lineups and such. I will also be publishing an article on Thursday with all of my favorite plays from the slate, the guys who project the best point per dollar plays, and some options that I think will go overlooked and may come in a little bit underowned. So I will be publishing an article on the Stokastic NFL page on Thursday as well. But for this video, I'm really just trying to show you how I'm going to be setting up my fantasy cruncher and the big things to know before setting up fantasy cruncher. For me, the biggest things I want to know are just the quarterback tendencies. Do they rush? And also, are they throwing the ball to the running back? So I want to know how involved the running backs are and how much the quarterbacks have a tendency to run. Those are the biggest things I need to know when I'm initially setting up my fantasy cruncher. Obviously, as we get more information, I might make some changes as we go, but this is just how I'm going to be setting it up from the get-go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my columns on this main page. I have a quick view saved called Showdown Settings, where I just have the columns that I like to see in the middle of the page: ownership projections, my projection for the player, which is just the stochastic projections are my initial projections, my exposure caps, and then also how much I get to each player once I have run a crunch. The other thing that I'm going to do before I go into advanced options is I'm going to go into the captain tab up here, and I'm going to set a cap on every player in the captain spot. So I'm going to make a universal in the exposure column here. Going to set that cap to 20%. So now I can't get more than 20% of any player in that captain spot. Okay, now I'm going to go into advanced options. And I should note that 20%, that's just the most common number that I use there. I just use a 20% cap so I can, get to up to 20% of a player. It changes game to game. I don't think that this is a game where I'm going to be going over that 20% mark for any player. And I also don't feel the need to spread it out between like 10 different players necessarily, getting a lot of captain exposure. So I think 20% is a pretty good number for this particular game. All right, now in this general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm making 150 lineups. Therefore, I'm going to leave this at one unique player per lineup. That just means my lineups can be one player different from each other. If I were making 20 or fewer lineups, I would probably change this to two, just for the purpose of diversifying my lineups a little bit. Salary cap, I'm not going to set a minimum salary. I am going to set a maximum salary just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. If I am lucky enough to win the contest, my lineup does great, maxes out. I don't want to just win $4,000 or $5,000 because I've duplicated myself with like 300 other people's entries. I would rather make lineups that are going to be unique or minimize the duplication. So to avoid just those most duplicated lineups, I'm going to set a salary cap here because most people are going to want to use the full $50,000 that DraftKings lets you use. I'm going to set a cap of 49,000. I think you can still make lineups for most slates that project pretty similarly, that have almost the same odds of winning, but you just are going to win so much more money if you do win. So I'm setting a salary cap here that's leaving at least $1,000 on the table. Offensive players versus defense, the default is set to a max of 2 players versus defense. I'm changing that to 5. That means I could theoretically have 5 Packers players and the Tennessee defense on the other side of it. It seems counterintuitive because generally if the Packers are, scoring a lot of points, enough to get 5 players into my lineup, that probably means that the Tennessee defense is giving up a lot of points as well. But the Tennessee defense could give up a good number of points and still, have a pick six, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, or just, 4 sacks. There are a lot of ways for the defense to score fantasy points, even if they are giving up a lot of points to the opposing team. So they'll lose points in terms of how much you how many points you hold your opponent to, but they can pick up points in other ways. So it can certainly work out, especially in a game scenario where the Tennessee offense isn't doing much and maybe the defense could be the highest scoring play or at least the highest scoring point per dollar play from the team. So I'm going to set that to 5 players versus the defense. And of course, I'm not going to get to that often anyway. I'm just allowing for it to come up in my 150 set. It's not something that I'm trying to force in there. I'm just saying if it comes up projection wise, if it projects well enough, I'm going to allow those types of lineups. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. Global exposure cap, I'm going to leave that at 100%. You already saw I set the captain exposure cap to 20% for elsewhere. I'm going to leave it at 100%. Typically, I don't love to have 100% of players in my lineups, but there's no reason not to. That's just a risk tolerance thing. Typically, I'll cut back a little bit from there, but in some scenarios, it's probably the right decision to just play 100% of certain players. Randomness, I'm going to set to 50%. That is there's nothing magical about that number. If you want more control over your lineups, generally I would recommend using lower randomness. And also if you're using classic randomness, maybe you want to use 30 or 40% here, might make a little bit more sense. But for me, using normal distribution randomness, I usually just leave it at 50% and leave a little bit up to chance. Minimum projection included in calculation is set to 3. That's the default. I'm happy leaving that at 3. That means that any player who projects for 3 or fewer, or no, fewer than 3 fantasy points will not be included in my player pool. If I see a player who's projected for under 3 fantasy points and I think I want them to be in my player pool, I'm just going to manually change their projection to make sure that it is 3 or greater. So I'm going to leave that at 3 there. Thumbs up, thumbs down. This just means when you hit the thumbs up or thumbs down button, it's going to increase or decrease a player's projection by 8%. I think that's a good number. I don't use that feature a ton anyway, but I think 8% is generally a good number if you are wanting to use that feature. And players from each team max, I'm going to leave at 5. So I can have 5 from one team versus just 1 player from the other. All right, that's everything I'm going to do here in the general tab. I'm going to move over to the groups tab and make a few groups. And the most important groups here, oftentimes, most of the time, I'd say these are the only groups I make, are groups related to quarterbacks. There are certainly other groups you could make for positive correlations. But for me, I'm just making the ones that are really important, which are the quarterback groups. So I'm going to make a Rodgers captain group. Come down here, find Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot, make him my key player. And then I'm going to make a secondary group where I add all of his pass catching options. So starting with Randall Cobb here, Sammy Watkins, Alan Lazard. I should note here, I am making this video on Wednesday night. News could come out overnight that's going to change some of these player options, make people more or less viable. But generally, that is not going to affect how I'm setting up my Fantasy Cruncher, which is why I do this on Saturday night. All I really need to know is, again, the quarterback tendencies and whether they involve running backs in the passing game. In the case of the Packers, Aaron Jones is pretty involved, and A.J. Dillon is involved enough that I'm going to include him here as well. All right, so the reason that I make these groups related to the quarterback, and I've explained this a few times, so I'm going to make it quick, but the reason is quarterbacks are generally among the most expensive players on the slate, and they also, on every passing play, the receiver is outscoring the quarterback because they get a point per reception and they get more points per yard and per touchdown. So on every passing play, the receiver is scoring more points than the quarterback. So it's difficult for the quarterback to be the optimal captain unless they have a lot of rushing upside without bringing along pass catchers. And if they don't have much rushing upside at all, it's even still difficult for a quarterback to the optimal captain with just one pass catcher in the flex, because generally as I said, because the pass catcher is outscoring the quarterback on every passing play. So there's just kind of a thin window there for the quarterback to be the optimal captain without that pass catcher. If it's just one pass catcher in the lineup, that pass catcher is probably pretty involved, and it's kind of a thin window for that pass catcher. If all the volume is going to one pass catcher, they're probably going to be outscoring the quarterback, and they're more likely to be the optimal captain, especially given that pass catchers are generally less expensive than the quarterback. So typically, if I have a quarterback in the captain spot who doesn't have a ton of rushing upside, I prefer to have multiple pass catchers in the flex, which is why I'm making this group. For Aaron Rodgers, not a ton of rushing upside. I think he had one game where he had 40 rushing yards this year, but in general, he's just not doing a ton on the ground. So I would prefer, when I have Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot, to have multiple pass catchers in the flex. I'm not going to force that. I am going to say this rule: if any key player, so Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot, I'm going to use at least one player from this group, but I'm also going to make it more likely that I get to multiple pass catchers by giving boosts to these players in these lineups with Aaron Rodgers at captain. So I'm going to go ahead, give a little 12% boost to all of these pass catchers. I don't see anybody here who projects so well point per dollar that I'm worried about getting to 100% of them if I give them a 12% boost in these lineups. That's one thing I try to avoid. I don't want to say, if I have Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot, I want to have 100% of this receiver in those lineups. You could. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just something that I generally tend to avoid. And then for running backs, although they are involved, I'm going to give them a slightly lesser boost. I think that is a good starting place. So this is just going to force it to have at least one pass catcher in lineups with Aaron Rodgers, the captain, and then with these boosts, make it more likely that I get to multiple in those lineups. Again, if I were making 20 or fewer lineups, I think I would probably just change this down here and say, if any key player use at least two players from this group, and then maybe forego the boosts here, or at least make smaller boosts. But in a 150 set, I think I'm okay having a few that are just Aaron Rodgers with one pass catcher in the flex, because he does have, a little bit of rushing upside. He certainly could score a touchdown from the 1 yard line. There are ways for Aaron Rodgers to pick up points on the ground, even if he is not the most likely quarterback to do so. All right, now I'm going to make a Tannehill captain lineup. All right, Tannehill captain group here. So I'm going to find Ryan Tannehill in the captain spot, make him my key player. And now, same thing, I'm going to add all of his pass catchers. Ryan Tannehill is a little bit different from Aaron Rodgers in that he has shown more rushing upside more recently. I believe, each of the past two. So this year he has not actually rushed much at all, but each of the past 2 years he's rushed for right around 270 yards and 7 touchdowns. So he's actually shown some upside in the running game the past couple years, even though he has not really shown it this year. So I think that Ryan Tannehill does have a little bit more upside. I'm trying to decide if I want to include Derrick Henry in this group, and I think I'm just not going to. Maybe I'll include Dontrell Hilliard. So Derrick Henry so far this year, he's run something like 89 routes, and he's been targeted 20 times. So he's just not much of a target monster. He also projects so well that I think he's going to make it into a lot of these lineups naturally anyway. So I don't think I need to give Derrick Henry any kind of boost. I'd rather go to other pass catchers. Dontrell Hilliard has actually been targeted 22 times, so he's been targeted more times than Derrick Henry on just a few fewer routes. So I think I'm going to include him and not Derrick Henry. All right, now I'm going to say, again, Ryan Tannehill has a little bit more rushing upside. I still think I would, if I have Ryan Tannehill in the captain spot, I still think I want at least one pass catcher in the flex. He does have that rushing upside more so than Aaron Rodgers. I still think that if he puts up enough fantasy points to be in the captain spot, he's probably going to have at least a pretty good game through the air, and one of these receivers likely to get there. So I'm not going to click this only apply plus minus adjustments button. I am still going to say, if I have Ryan Tannehill in the captain spot, use at least one of these pass catchers. I'm still going to go ahead, though, and give these guys boosts as well. So that's more likely I get to multiple catchers. Again, Dontrell Hilliard, I'm just going to give a little bit of a boost. I think that's good. Now I'm going to make an Aaron Rodgers flex group. So I said I want multiple pass catchers when I have Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot. For Aaron Rodgers to be optimal in the flex spot, you could certainly get away with just one pass catcher. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a group that says Aaron Rodgers in the flex, make him my key player. And then I'm once again going to add all of these Packers pass catchers. Including the running backs. And because I have Aaron Rodgers in the flex spot here, I can also add all of these pass catchers in the captain spot. Try not to miss anybody here. Okay, I think that's good. For this group, I'm not even going to give any kind of boosts. I'm just going to require, if I have Aaron Rodgers in the flex spot, throw at least one pass catcher in there with him because, again, he just doesn't have the rushing upside to get there into an optimal lineup without bringing along at least one pass catcher somewhere. So I think this is good enough. I'll see what the lineups look like. Sometimes I adjust these things a little bit after I see the lineups, but I think this is good enough. I'm just going to require one for Ryan Tannehill, though. I'm going to make it a slightly different rule here. For Tannehill, I'm going to go find Tannehill in the flex spot, add him as a key player, add all of his pass catchers to the secondary group. Not going to include Derrick Henry. You could include Derrick Henry and just give him a small boost. I just don't think it's necessary because of how well he projects, and he's just so not involved in the passing game. He had a couple games early in the year where he was a little bit. It's kind of fallen off again recently. The most recent game, Tannehill did come back and target him 3 times, so you could make an argument that Derrick Henry should be included here. Some of those games where he was not targeted were with Malik Willis at quarterback, but in general, he hasn't run that many routes this year, so I think that I feel okay leaving Derrick Henry out. Okay. So now for Ryan Tannehill, unlike Aaron Rodgers, I think Ryan Tannehill could be optimal in the flex spot without bringing along a pass catcher. I think that he has at least that upside. So just because, again, he rushed for 7 touchdowns each of the past 2 years. And I think it could work out that, particularly like in a 5-1 lineup with, 5 Packers onslaught lineup, Ryan Tannehill could get in there just by rushing for 50 yards. If he adds in a touchdown, doesn't need to do much through the air to get there necessarily into the optimal lineup in the flex spot. I still would prefer to have at least one pass catcher with him, but in a set of 150 lineups, I think I'm going to at least allow for some lineups with Ryan Tannehill in the flex without any pass catchers from the Titans. Again, just to make it more likely that I don't get a ton of those lineups, I am going to go ahead and give a little boost to all of these pass catchers in those lineups. All right, that looks good. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups using my projections, the Stokastic projections at this point. All right, so right away, first thing I do, look at my lineups just to make sure they correlate in a way that makes sense to me. All right, so this first one, we've got Derrick Henry in the captain spot and then a Packers onslaught. I like that lineup. We got Aaron Rodgers in here with multiple pass catchers. All looks good here. Now the second lineup, Aaron Rodgers in the captain spot. We've got 2 primary pass catchers and then also Aaron Jones in there with Rodgers and then just a Derrick Henry run back. That looks good to me. Third lineup, Ryan Tannehill with 2 different pass catchers plus Derrick Henry. Got Rodgers with Randall Cobb. I think that's fine. Fourth lineup. So now here's one where we've got Ryan Tannehill in there without any pass catchers outside of Derrick Henry. You could include Derrick Henry as a pass catcher, but no real primary pass catching options. Again, I'm okay with seeing that in some lineups. I probably don't want to see it in 30 or 40 lineups. In general, I'd prefer to have at least one pass catcher in the lineup with him. But here, I think it's fine. I could see a scenario where Ryan Tannehill puts up, 12, 13 fantasy points by mostly, on the ground, scoring a touchdown, et cetera, et cetera. Derrick Henry obviously doesn't need to correlate with anybody. And then we've got Aaron Rodgers tied up with Randall Cobb and Aaron Jones there. So I think that lineup could work out. Here's one we got Tannehill with Woods. Here's another one, Tannehill and Derrick Henry. So I didn't include Derrick Henry in that group. Didn't give him any kind of boost, but again, just the projection is so good that he's going to get there naturally. All right, Tannehill with Treylon Burks looks good, plus Derrick Henry. Rodgers with Dylan Cobb. In general, I think these are these are correlating well enough for me. Seen a few of these with Tannehill and just Derrick Henry. Don't love that. Here's one with Tannehill and nobody else from the Titans. So maybe I'd go back into advanced options and just give slightly bigger boost to these pass catchers. So started with a 4% boost. Maybe I'll up it to 8% boost to these primary pass catchers in lineups that have Tannehill in the flex. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. All right, now I'm going to recrunch. All right, so now we see Tannehill has a pass catcher. Down here, we still see another one with Tannehill with just Derrick Henry in the lineup. Tannehill with a pass catcher. I included Dontrell Hilliard in that group. Tannehill with Woods. Okay, so that seemed to do the trick. I'm running into fewer lineups with Tannehill and no pass catchers. I'm getting into a ton of Tannehill with Dontrell Hilliard. He might project a little bit too well. Point per dollar. Let's see here. I guess just 11%. That's probably fine. Getting Hilliard in 11% of my Tannehill lineups. So in general, I think that these look fine. These correlate well enough for me. So then the second thing that I look at, I make sure my lineups correlate in a way that I think makes sense. And then I just go through position by position up here, clicking these different tabs and look at the exposures. Am I getting to about how much I want of different players? And I'm not going to make these decisions right now. Again, I'm making this video on Wednesday night. I don't usually do this until after we get inactives. So it's pretty late in the day. I end up doing it during live before lock most days. So it can be a little bit stressful at the end, but can't make those decisions right now on Wednesday before I know all of the information. I'm also going to be digging deep a little bit tomorrow because I'm going to be writing an article about this. So I don't want to make player decisions now. I just kind of want to show you my general thought process as I'm doing this. So all I'm doing, I go through position by position. Quarterback, 55% Rodgers, 42% Tannehill. That strikes me as fine, having not done any research. Looking at running backs, I'm going to sort by salary here. 74% Derrick Henry plus how much a captain. So I'm getting 94% Derrick Henry in my lineups. I might not want 94% Derrick Henry. Generally, I start off by, I don't make changes. I don't lower anybody's projections or give thumbs down right away. I start by just going through first and is there anybody I want to give boost to? And I see if that affects the players that I am already getting to a ton of. So Aaron Jones still already getting a lot. AJ Dillon. Maybe I want a little bit more AJ Dillon. Give him a little thumbs up here. Dontrell Hilliard. Maybe I want more. Again, not sure if I will, but maybe I'd give him a thumbs up. Hassan Haskins, do I want him in my player pool? If I want him in my player pool, I'm going to have to give him a projection boost up to at least 3 fantasy points. For now, I'm going to leave him out of my pool. Alan Lazard getting to 31%. That seems fine. Christian Watson, I don't know. He had 3 touchdowns the last game. Is that real? Is it a mirage? Is he going to be coming on and being a great wide receiver going forward? Fields only at 23%. Maybe I want more than 8%. So maybe I'll give him a couple thumbs up. Robert Woods getting 31%. That seems pretty good. Nick Westbrook-Akine also just had a big breakout game last week. I'm getting to less than 1%. The field's at 16%. Maybe I want more. Westbrook-Akine. 25% Treylon Burks. That seems fine. Sammy Watkins not getting to any. Sammy Watkins has let us down before, but he's 7.4% projected ownership. Maybe I'd want to go get a little bit of Sammy Watkins, give him a couple thumbs up. Samari Toure, we just saw him score a touchdown a few weeks ago in an island game. Maybe I'll give him up to at least 3 fantasy points, maybe a little bit more. Just get him into my player pool. Now, Randall Cobb. I'm getting to 86% Randall Cobb because he's 200 and he projects for over 6 fantasy points. But let me take a look here. All right, so he's coming back from IR. Interesting. So he should take away from Alan Lazard and Christian Watson a little bit, potentially. I'm definitely not going to want 86% Randall Cobb. I'm pretty comfortable saying that even now. I think that the potential to fail is certainly there. So I'm not going to want that much of Randall Cobb. I also got 40. So I've got 100% Randall Cobb currently in my lineups. Not going to want that. So I can tell you right now, I'm going to be, and probably giving thumbs down isn't going to be enough. I guess I'll start there by giving him 3 thumbs down, see if that does anything for me. Cody Hollister, maybe I want in a few lineups, I'll raise his projection to 3. And then tight end, not getting to a ton of Robert Tonyan. Maybe I want a little bit more, give him a couple thumbs up. Austin Hooper, maybe I want a little bit more than 4%, give him a couple thumbs up. Okonkwo, project for 2.5, and Josiah DeGuara also project for 2.5. I'm just going to give these guys a little boost, maybe up to 4, because they're not the minimum salary, and I think I do want these guys in my player pool, so I'll give them a little boost. Mercedes Lewis, maybe I'll give him a little bit of a boost as well. Jeff Swaim, give him the boost. All right, Randy Bullock, not getting to a ton, give him a couple thumbs up. Mason Crosby, a thumbs up. And then defenses, no idea how much I'm going to want. But for now, I'm only getting 4% Titans, 21% Packers. Maybe I'll give a couple thumbs up there, one here. I don't know. This is kind of arbitrary at this point. I'm not sure. I haven't made these decisions yet how much I want of different players. But in general, this is my process. I'm just going through position by position. Do I want more? Do I want less? How do I feel about this exposure level to different players? And then I'll crunch again. All right, so now I'm getting more of the kickers. Still not getting much of the Titans. And again, so this is, I go through, I crunch out, and then I do the same thing over and over. Go look through the positions again. Still not getting Titans. Maybe I'll give them 1 thumbs up. Full disclosure here, I usually am not using these thumbs up, thumbs down. This is what I recommend for people who are newer to Fantasy Cruncher, just using these 8% boosts at a time. I usually actually just change the projections myself bit by bit. Usually it's like, 0.2 fantasy points at a time until I get to exposure levels that I like. I also, sometimes I can see 0.2 is not going to be enough. I can generally just look at player salaries, how close they are relative to other players in salary, and how much exposure I'm getting to other players. And I can kind of eyeball it and see how much I need to give boost. But for here, I'm just going to give thumbs up for players that have, other than players who project for fewer than 3 fantasy points. I'm just trying that instead because I know that is typically what I recommend for newer players. All right, so I've already given these guys boosts in terms of their projection to make sure they have above 3. Still not getting to any of Okonkwo. Maybe I need to give him a few thumbs up, get him in there. Josiah DeGuara, maybe a couple. Mercedes Lewis. Not getting to much Austin Hooper at all, so maybe give him that final thumbs up. Now I'm getting to a ton of Robert Tonyan. Maybe I'll just leave him there for now. See if it comes down as I adjust other players. Still getting to way too much Randall Cobb. I don't think I'm going to want that much. So I already did 3 thumbs down. Wasn't quite enough. Maybe I just change his projection down to 5 fantasy points. See what that does for me. And then Samari Toure, maybe give him a couple thumbs up. Sammy Watkins, I already gave him 3 thumbs up. It still wasn't enough. So maybe I get rid of the thumbs up and just change his projection also to, say, 5 fantasy points. Treylon Burks, now I'm getting less in the field. Maybe I want a little bit more Treylon Burks. Nick Westbrook. All right, I'm still getting to a ton of Derrick Henry, both in the captain spot and in the flex. Maybe I need to just give him a couple thumbs down at this point. I've already tried boosting elsewhere. Maybe I just need to see what happens if I give him a thumbs down or 2. And note, I gave Derrick Henry the thumbs down. I didn't change his projection. So I only gave him the thumbs down in the flex spot. I'm still getting to my max of 20% Derrick Henry in the captain spot here. So now I still have Derrick Henry in 61% of my lineups. That seems reasonable, probably around where I want him to be. Still, 12% AJ Dillon. Again, anyway, I'm not going to go through and do this 30 times like I will on some slates until I get to the exposure levels that I like. I'm just trying to show you my general process. And I can see here, I'm just going into wide receiver, still getting way too much Randall Cobb, not getting to any Sammy Watkins. Maybe I need to give, and you can see this because I have them projected the exact same. Randall Cobb is 200, Sammy Watkins 4,800. It makes sense that I would not get to any Sammy Watkins. So maybe to get to some Watkins and Toure and not Randall and not so much Randall Cobb, I'd have to give a little bit of a boost to Sammy Watkins, Toure, lower Randall Cobb a bit. So now I'm going to give Toure and Cobb the exact same projection. I think I want more Randall Cobb than Toure. Now, because I've given them the same projection and Randall Cobb is so much cheaper, I'm still going to get more Randall Cobb than Toure, but maybe it'll be a little bit more even now. So let's crunch out one more time. Again, I'm not going to do this all the different times, but I just kind of want to show you as an example. Actually, not as big of a discrepancy as I expected that to be there. Only a little bit more Randall Cobb than Toure with the $1,000 price difference. I guess that makes some sense. Still not getting to any Sammy Watkins, so I'd go ahead and keep boosting him a little bit and boosting the guys that I'm not getting enough of. But generally, this is just my entire process. I've made sure through the groups that my lineups correlate the way I want them to, and then I go through and make sure that I'm getting to exposure levels that I like. You can see here, though, still I look at this. I've got Tannehill right away in the flex with no pass catchers. Again, I'm allowing it intentionally. I just don't want to see a ton of it now. I see a few that have Tannehill with pass catchers, so that's generally my preference. I'd like to see that in more lineups than those with Tannehill and no pass catchers. Here's another one. This is another spot where I think if you were making 20 or fewer lineups, maybe 40 or fewer lineups, I might just go in to advanced options, that group where I have the Tannehill and the flex. I might uncheck this box and just say require at least one pass catcher. That probably makes more sense if you're not playing 150 lineups. If you are playing 150, again, like what I'm doing, I'm just giving that boost to make it more likely. If I have 10 lineups or so that have Ryan Tannehill in the flex and don't have any pass catchers, I think I'd be fine with up to like 10. But if you're playing 50 or so lineups, I might just require at least one pass catcher because it is certainly not as likely for Ryan Tannehill to be optimal in any spot without bringing along at least one pass catcher. So anyway, in general, though, I think that these lineups correlate well enough. And I think, I would just keep working, probably crunch out 30 times before I get to the exposure levels that I like, but not going to do that now. If you want to see my player takes, I will be, again, publishing an article on Thursday after I've done some digging into trends on the teams snap counts, routes run, stuff like that, to figure out who I'm going to want to play tomorrow night. I'll also be on live before lock, so check that out. Anyway, hope you can find some success using this or a similar process on Thursday Night Football.